Hello and welcome to Michael's Minty Music for today. Today we review Queen's self-titled debut album. Came out in 1973. It's alright. I didn't really like it when I first heard it, but it has grown on me over time as an album. There are still definitely some decent songs here, so in any case, it is still a good album. This is the track listing, and these are the tracks that add to my playlist. Only 4 out of 10. But this album's actually better than it seems. Most of the songs are alright. There are a few good ones on here, but most are kind of okay. It's pretty experimental. They haven't clearly settled on a sound yet, and it makes the album sort of seem a bit messy, but they managed to put it together pretty well, considering that most of the songs here aren't really outstanding. Side 1 flows really well, considering that most of the songs are pretty wacky and weird. Doing Alright is basically 2 songs. Great Rat King is 1 song, but it's pretty crazy. It's almost rap-esque. And My Fairy King is kind of slower, so it's kind of a weird mix. Side 2 doesn't flow as well, but it's generally more varied, so some of the songs are more interesting than Side 1 songs. So Side 2 is kind of the more experimental side on this pretty experimental album. The main thing here is this album doesn't really sound like anything else that was coming out at the time, which is a big advantage for it. The only issue is that a lot of the stuff here is clearly not polished and not as good as what they would make later. There's only 1 single released off this album, which was the opening track, Keep Yourself Alive, which was also the most popular track off this album, although it didn't really hit the radio as much as some other Queen songs. It might have been on there a little bit, but it wasn't, it's not a big track in their repertoire, but it does sometimes end up on their greatest hits lists. My favorite song is definitely the same track. Keep Yourself Alive is definitely just the best track on the album. The only one that comes close is the last track, Seven Seas of Rye, but it's just instrumental, so it kind of lacks the impact that Keep Yourself Alive has. It's really a great track to open it, and yeah, pretty much the standout track on this album. I rank this album second to last out of all of Queen's albums. This album is actually pretty good debut for a moderately successful band. The issue here is that Queen is a lot more than moderately successful. Pretty much all of their albums after this were better than their debut. The only one I put lower is Innuendo, because I don't really like the style and sound of that album. I think Queen is maybe just a little bit better in terms of having some good songs on here and having a good experimental style. This album doesn't take my top spot from 1973. That goes to Billy Joel's Piano Man, which, although isn't quite as experimental, it is a lot more polished and still pretty musically diverse considering, and it has a more consistent sound. So I think that one's the better album here. Next up is Led Zeppelin's 1973 album, same year, Houses of the Holy. It's, I don't know how it's going to be, but it's their first album that's not just their name, so that's pretty interesting. And I'll review that next, so stay tuned and stay minty.